the last day of campaigning ahead of the US election. And Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are crisscrossing the key Rust Belt states of Pennsylvania and Michigan today in a last-ditch attempt to win over voters. Some 78 million Americans have already cast their ballots. But as Harris and Trump fight for the small handful that remain undecided, here's a little of their closing messages.
So, church, we have 2 days. 2 days until we decide the fate of our nation. And here is what feeds my spirit as I travel across our beautiful nation, from state to state and from church to church. I see faith in action in remarkable ways. I see a nation determined to turn the page on hatred and division and chart a new way forward.
It's a crooked country, and we're going to make it straight. We're going to make it straight, and it's not an easy thing to do. They'll want to put you in jail because you want to make it straight. Think of it. Think of it. They cheat on elections, and you call them on it, and they want to put you in jail. Think about it. It's the most incredible thing I've ever seen, but I love it. You know why? Because we've proven something, we've shown something, and we're going to get it fixed, and we got to win this election. It's all up to now. I mean, we got 2 days. We've been working for 9 years. We did a great job.
Well, I'm very pleased to welcome to the programme live now John Rick MacArthur. He is the president and the publisher of Harper's magazine. Its November issue that you're looking at the front cover of there focuses on Trump and his impact on the Republican Party. Welcome to you. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Look, Trump in that soundbite we just played, talking about the United States being a crooked country. It is a rather dark vision of America he's been painting in the last couple of days. How do you view Trump's language, his strategy, as we enter these final hours before voting?
Well, it's also laden with irony because he's a crook. He's a convicted criminal. So for him to talk about making the crooked straight, which of course also sounds religious, from the Bible, is sort of remarkable. And what I see increasingly is a return to the idea that this is a referendum on Trump. It's not about Kamala Harris. It's not about Democrats versus Republicans. It's really a referendum about Trump. And Trump seems to be trying to beat himself in some ways. Yesterday, I see that at a rally in Pennsylvania, he actually went off script and said that he never should have left the White House. He should have just stayed, which is absolutely bizarre and feeds into the idea that he's a fascist who wants to take over the country. And at the same time, he doesn't really come up with anything specific that he can do to straighten the crooked country. He just warns that there's going to be an election stolen. He's going to have the election stolen, which is also kind of self-defeating. Instead of saying, I'm looking forward to winning tomorrow, he says, I'm expecting to be robbed tomorrow, which is a very odd way to campaign politically. It's worked well for him up to a point. And Kamala Harris is a weak candidate, quite frankly. She's not an effective counterpuncher, and she speaks in cliches and bromides. But as long as he keeps shooting himself in the foot, like his rally in Madison Square Garden, where he let the comedian call Puerto Rico a garbage dump or a pile of garbage, he's beating himself.
You talked about Kamala Harris there, and you said that in your view, she's a weak candidate. Explain to us why you believe that.
Well, she doesn't stand for any. She never says, I stand for this or I stand for that. She only talks about standing for the future. Turning the page, ending division, but she doesn't say how she's going to end the division. The fundamental problem with the Democratic Party is since Bill Clinton ran it, it's been the party of free trade, the party of Wall Street, the party of deregulation, the party of high finance. And there are millions and millions of angry, blue-collar, working-class people in the United States who have vowed never to vote Democrat again because of they lost their jobs because of NAFTA or permanent normal trade relations with China. There's a deep, deep resentment in the working class, which they have not addressed. They just keep saying, try to think positively. And if you're making half what you made 20 years ago, inflation adjusted, it's hard to say, oh, I'm with the program. I'm with the positive people. I'm not with the dark, negative people who support Trump. They're very angry.
Do you have a sense as to what the actual result will be? I mean, you paint a very flawed vision of both candidates. We've been hearing that the race is extremely tight. What's your expectation for the election?
Well, let me tell you, I'm afraid to make a prediction because I'm almost certainly going to be wrong if I try to make a prediction. I'll tell you what my nightmare is, though. My nightmare is that Harris runs up a bigger popular vote victory than Hillary Clinton in 2016, and Trump still takes the Electoral College. I'm not predicting that. I'm just saying then you might have riots on the left. It's quite terrifying to think about it. In the case that it's a dead heat in a lot of these swing states like Michigan, what you're going to see is a long, long, long recount and no decision. There's not going to be a decision on who's won for weeks if it's as close as the polls say they are. And I'm very worried about that, too, because during the long delays about who's won Pennsylvania, who's won Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, et cetera, a lot of bad things can happen. Don't forget that what broke Trump in 2020 was Fox News calling Arizona for Biden, which is sort of extraordinary. I mean, his favorite TV network actually plunged a dagger into him. And I'm wondering again whether Fox is going to be straight on this one, whether they're going to actually, because they have a very brilliant election analysis, Arnon Mishkin, who's the one who called Arizona. And I'm wondering whether he's going to be allowed to be honest about what the real results are based on his polling data.
That's fascinating, and there's lots in that I'd like to unpick if we have the time. But I do want to ask you, first of all, about early voting. We know some 78 million people have already voted. Apparently 50% of those are women. Do we know whether early voting benefits one candidate, one party in particular?
No, but we do know that it benefits chaos. And I'm disappointed that the Democrats and the Republicans have gone on board with this, because the more voting at a distance or voting early, voting sort of out of the regular schedule there is, the more challenges there are going to be. If everything happens on the same day, it's harder for the loser, I think, to complain, because everybody's following the same rules on the same day, and depending on which state they're in. Now you're going to have a huge amount of mail-in ballots, which are going to be easily challenged, or will be automatically challenged if they favor the wrong candidate, so to speak. So I think it's a terrible thing to have early. Actually, I'm not an early voting person or a mail-in voting person, and it's ironic also. Trump says he's for it now, whereas before he thought it was a terrible thing and a guarantee for fraudulent elections. Now, because he seems to think he's winning with the mail-in ballots, he's fine with it. We'll see what he says day after tomorrow.
Just a final question then, to pick up on what you were saying before about there being challenges in the courts if this result is as close as the pollsters tell us it will be. What do you think it will take for supporters of Trump, MAGA America, to accept the results if Harris indeed comes out on top, but by a small margin?
Well, I mean, they'll have to be convinced by the local Republican establishment that they lost, and which is what happened finally in 2020. Local Republicans and even high-level party officials said, "Look, you've lost. Face facts. We've done the recount 3 times in Arizona or wherever, and every time you come out the loser." And he finally had to accept reality up to a point, But then, of course, on January 6th, he didn't accept reality. He urged his supporters to storm the Capitol. So I'm worried about that, too. Liberals are afraid of white riots, people burning down government buildings. White Trumpists are afraid of being robbed again, being cheated. And listen, the Democratic Party is no stranger to election fraud. So it depends on the state. But I think this is going to be the most closely watched, maybe the most honest election we've ever had because of the potential of challenges from both sides and because Trump screamed bloody murder in 2020 and is still saying the election was stolen from him. He just said it again yesterday. He should have stayed in power. Should have just stayed.
There's so much on that I'd like to ask you, but unfortunately we are out of time. John Rick MacArthur talking to us there. He's the president of Harper's Magazine. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.